Hello, Ann. Are you with us?
I am. Hello.
Hello. And we're going to introduce you. You have followed this case, have followed the Justice for David Crowley pages, and have followed the case, but you also have some psychic backgrounds. And when you went through this, you came through with a little bit of a different background. So we're going to have you run through that now as well for the listeners. And listeners, this is Ann.
You open up the basement stairs. It's completely recarpeted and painted. It's all fresh and new. But on the left, there is a wall in an area, and I felt some hot spot in that area too. So there was a lot of energy or momentum, or a lot of time in that area too. Another interesting thing to note about the basement is that the listing agent noted that in the basement, towards the back utility room, there was a white wall with some faint brown stains, and she said that was probably moisture coming in through the wall. The area was painted over, and this is very faint. I thought that was interesting to compare what moisture would look like in that home versus what was seen in that home as far as blood coming down after the death of the Crowley family. The other thing I noticed, too, I felt very strongly in the home is, so if you go off the living room, there's a small main hallway. There's a bathroom, a bedroom, and across from that is another area that could be a bedroom, and then there's a bedroom at the far corner with a window facing the street. That area, I felt a lot of, I would say, almost frantic energy. Like pacing thoughts, racing, panic. And I just got the feeling that David and Kamel wanted to escape. They wanted to leave. They wanted to go somewhere. And I had the feeling that they were planning to leave, but they wanted to leave sooner. Something had triggered them. They felt the danger. They needed to get out. And I felt that they had a conversation in that room regarding plans to leave.
Ann, if I can interrupt Ann for just a second, that corner bedroom, is that Ranny's? That's Ranny's bedroom where the daughter lived, right? That was her bedroom?
I wasn't sure which room it was, but it was a corner room right across from the master.
Yes, okay, that would be Ranny's bedroom. So there's something may have been taking place there, conversation or some kind of dialogue as far as leaving or escaping or getting out. Okay, thank you.
Felt danger all around them is what I felt. They didn't feel they could trust anybody is what I sensed. I also had the sense that the house at some time was ransacked and put back together. And I saw what was the object looking for was two pieces of paper, slightly crumpled with one end extended up, and it could be legal papers or some kind of a document. I saw that very clearly. It was just the image of these two papers held together like a paper clip. Let's see here. Yeah, and like I said, I didn't see any or feel anything like there was an entity or a spirit or anything like that in the house. I tend to agree with the psychic. It's ready for a family if somebody could accept the history and move in. I don't know, that would be a tough sell, but I didn't feel any sense of entities or anything like that. Now, typically, if there was an entity, the theory is that when a spirit or a demon manifests, it needs energy to manifest. It needs energy to do, like, move something or cause hot or cold or any of those things. So if there really was a spirit in the home, it would almost be required to haunt or cause disturbances because it would, in theory, take energy from a living person or an animal and use that energy like a parasite to manifest. So if nobody is feeling any disturbances, nobody's scared, nobody's feeling watching, there's the builders in the home, the realtors aren't noticing anything, highly unlikely something is happening. And I also think, too, for a spirit an entity to, in theory, cause somebody to murder his family in the South, you're talking about something that would have to be on Amity level 4 demons. That is exceedingly rare. And if something like that was happening, you would definitely see signs. You wouldn't have to dig too hard for it. So I'm not really buying the demon possession.
Did you say Amityville, like the Amityville horror?
Amityville horror. It was, yeah.
Okay.
I know an alternative theory, which I have personally seen happen before. I've seen people who were, level of mind control or being manipulated. They call it crazy making or gaslighting. You could literally drive somebody crazy. I mean, to the point where they do think that there are demons coming after them, or they do feel like there's entities in the home. I mean, you could literally isolate somebody, feed them ideas, and manipulate that person where you do drive somebody crazy. That has been known to happen, for example, in cults and in abusive relationships. That's another theory that could be investigated.
And that's more mind control background.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And usually what happens with the mind control scenario is you'll take a regular person, isolate them from friends and family, so they rely on one person or one group of people. And that person is their social network. That's their connection to the outside world. That's their source of information. That's their sense of feeling good. And if you have somebody who's controlling you in that way, they'll start to play into your weaknesses or fears and exploit that, or feed you information that's not true, or they might do things like, if you rely on them for something, they might withhold that till you give them what they want, and next thing you know, you're caught in this web you can't get out of. I mean, that's not really a paranormal thing. You see it all the time with battered women. They rely on their abuser, and their whole reality changes, and they don't even know that they're being controlled until they escape from it. So, that's always a possibility too.
Some of these theories, and that we've heard is, and I don't believe this myself, but that David was doing that to Rani and Kamel and secluding them, getting them isolated, manipulating them, and using mind control to do whatever it was he was doing because he was crazy. Now, I don't buy that myself, but is that anything to do with paranormal or spirits or anything in the house that's evil or possession related, or are those two totally different things?
Totally different things.
Okay.
You're either going to see evidence of one or the other. I mean, you really have to take apart the theories and examine the merits of each and the evidence behind it. You're going to see evidence of one or the other. Or we might not find evidence of either, and it might be something completely different.
Interesting. Now, I haven't seen the screening of the documentary "A Gray State" by Erik Nelson, but from what I've heard, that's kind of the angle that's being pushed. That there's possession, demon possession, but at also the same time there's controlling and manipulation and mind control. It seems to me they're throwing everything at the wall, hoping it all just sticks. But in reality, that's very unlikely that all those things would come together like that. Did you attend the screening, Ann?
I saw the screening of A Gray State. The most evidence I saw of mind control, in my opinion, was done by Erik Nelson himself. And the other evidence was highly skeptical because of what he was doing in its filming. And then some of it was so highly edited that if you didn't see the beginning and the end, say for example, the infamous footage of Ronnie talking about the Redmen, you saw like a small clip. You didn't see when the film started and when it ended. So it's very hard to determine what happened, why, what the context was. You're just kind of fed this narrative. So what point A Gray State to me I thought was total BS was the scene where Erik talks to the two Michaels from Michael Entertainment Group about David and gets their impressions about David. So David was selling his script to these guys. They had a plan in place. There was money and terms on the table. They wanted to take the Gray State script and get more financial backers behind it. They had the whole plan in place. It was all ready to go. So Erik Nelson is talking to the Michaels. What do you think of David? He's like, he's great. We love the script. This is viable. We can work with this. And then he said something to the effect of, well, do you think David was crazy and he killed his family? And then the next line was, well, if he did that, he would have to, be a very good actor. And then Erik Nelson gives these two film producers a clip, a very personal clip David made, an audio tape, where he's prepping for the meeting, and he's talking to himself, and he's psyching himself up, and he's talking about what happened with the reaction are, He's talking about the background he did on the film producers, what he's going to wear. But the film producers were given no context on this audio clip. They had no knowledge that David routinely prepared and talked to himself in this way. This is just his style. So when they heard the clip, they felt that David was setting them up, that he was manipulating them, and that he was conning them into buying the script. They had a hugely negative reaction to David after hearing the audio clip and after Erik said it to them. And one of the Michaels actually said that David sounds like a sociopath. They said they felt betrayed and they were angry. And actually, during the Q&A, Alec Wilkinson said that he felt that what Erik did was unfair, and he felt that David had low self-esteem, and he routinely listened to hypnosis tapes, and this was just his way of preparing for meeting with this really important meeting that could be life-changing. At which point, Erik Nelson changed his story. We could hear it in the Q&A, and he started out by saying, and this is where I knew he set up the Michaels. First he said, I should have warned them not to chew their gum, and he laughed at the negative reaction they had. And then he changed his story after it was pointed out to them, and he said, oh, I talked to them, it was okay, they're not mad anymore. And, my take on it was, if you have to manipulate somebody to get a reaction in order to sell your film is not credible and it's not trustworthy. I don't believe it.
Yeah, very interesting.
There was a couple other scenes like that in the film too. I mean, hard to believe.
And so, did they show anything with David and Kamel relating back to demon possession, entity, Satan, satanic worship?
They mentioned it a couple of times. They show that clip where apparently David was going out to Home Depot to get some wood to build this organic compost bin in the backyard, and he got home and Kamel had some kind of rapture. The interesting thing about it was that it was almost like David was recording the scene after it happened. It wasn't when it happened. So you could hear him saying, okay, Kamel, you said you saw this. So it was hard, like I was watching, it was hard to figure out what was going on. You didn't have a beginning or an end, so I couldn't tell the relevance or the context. I just kind of was left wanting more information. It was really hard to deduce what was going on. I couldn't look at that point blank the way it was presented and say, yes, there was a demon involved, or no, there just wasn't enough information.
Well, I suppose with Erik Nelson having access to 13,000 images and hours of audio and video, are you saying that he maybe just cherry-picked the items that place David looking bad and put those together, kind of a greatest hits, and now he looks like a madman?
He did, and then Erik Nelson also admitted during the Q&A that he had his friend, who is a psychiatrist, look at the information he presented to affirm that David was psychotic. But there was also some contradictions, because Erik was saying at one point David's psychotic, but in the period where he would have been most psychotic, December leading up to the murders, Erik also says David, when he wrote emails, he was very professional and polite. I mean, you're either psychotic or you're not. You don't flip that on and off like a switch. The other thing that Erik said during Q&A, he has proof that David is psychotic because he has 6 versions of the Gray State script, and in the last one, It's not written in the way you write a script. He can't read it. It's all over the place. At which point Mitch Heil stood up and said that doesn't mean David's psychotic. His style of writing was like that. And Mitch said my job was to take David's, thoughts and tangents and break it down to common sense. Like what you were seeing in that script is how he normally spoke. The other thing that I had a big problem with in Gray State is they only pursued the psychotic theory. They didn't get into forensic evidence. Nothing about multiple bullets in the home. Nothing about gun being found on David's left side when he's right-handed. I mean, there was just so many things that weren't discussed in it that the viewers weren't just given all the information. It didn't seem credible to me that we're made to believe this narrative, but we're not given all the information to decide for ourselves.
I confirm, keeping in mind now that I've never seen it, but I was under the impression that this documentary was more of a police investigative breakdown, proving what happened in the murders in the house. Did they not go down that angle at all, really? The forensics?
The whole thing from start to end was psychotic. He's abusive, and in fact, Tom Lydon said during Q&A that he had several friends who had died from suicide, so he just knew that David did this. And I felt Tom Lydon was biased by his experiences, maybe angry with his friends and projecting that onto David. I didn't find Tom Lydon credible at all. And in fact, Tom Lydon admitted during Q&A that he was given the entire police file, which was 1,200 to 1,500 pages. And he admitted that he thought the police file was boring, so he said, I skipped to the end where all the good parts are, and that's where I found the picture of the bloody writing on the wall. I mean, I don't feel a credible reporter is going to say anything in a police file is boring. You need to investigate everything. Wow,
that's interesting. So the documentary is essentially just out to discredit David Crowley.
It's a narrative how David went psychotic and became an abuser. And the interesting thing was several times during the Q&A, Erik says there's no evidence that he's abusive, but then he turns around and says he's abusive.
Wow. Great.
Yes, I mean, and then they define abuse as not, there's no evidence of physical abuse against Kamel. They said he was psychologically abused, and then they would say there's no evidence of abuse.
Interesting. Now, Greg, do you have any questions for Ann here before we? I almost forgot about asking you here. Let's ask.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
It kind of sounds like they have no proof of David's guilt. Is that right?
They don't prove David's guilt, and the other appalling thing while I'm at it is when in the Gray State, Erik Nelson showed his clips of his interview with Greg and Dan U-boats. It was so edited. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, they had one line from Greg, and I can't remember the exact line. It was something like, I don't need no proof or something like that. And then they had one line from Dan doing his show, and yet that's supposed to represent that you guys are both nutcases and conspiracy theorists, and nobody's supposed to listen to what you have to say. I mean, when a director resorts to that kind of manipulation, you can't believe anything they say.
Interesting. It kind of ties back to the article from the New Yorker by Alec Wilkinson. It all kind of ties in. Were these two done as companion sets, that this documentary and that article by Alec? Was he there in attendance as well?
Alec was on Skype answering questions. Now, the interesting thing about Alec is he seemed a little more balanced than Erik Nelson. He seemed like he was looking at, he definitely had his own thoughts, but it seemed like he was a little more balanced and had a little more logic, where Erik seemed a little more extreme and very bent on this is what happened.
Even though he couldn't prove any of it, and didn't even try to prove any of it. It was just all... So what was the whole purpose? Like, if you could sum up the movie, what the hell were they trying to really prove then? If they weren't trying to prove David's guilt?
The movie was a very dramatic narrative of a man who went psychotic and killed his family. And it was interesting, too, because Mitch Heil stood up during Q&A and said he did not believe David had PTSD from the war. He exhibited no signs of it. I mean, that to me, he went psychotic, and now we're supposed to leave him out, went psychotic with him, and there's just too many unanswered questions in that. The only thing that the movie did was pull on your heartstrings to try to pull you into believing this and not question anything you see.
Gotcha.
So it's a propaganda piece, probably the entire thing.
Yeah, and the ending was really bizarre too, because the end, what you heard a distant voice, I assume was Dan Crowley Jr. saying, "I wanted that dog," and it ends with it was actually to me very offensive. It ends with Paleo running in this backyard playing, and there's a family standing in the distance watching this dog jumping and leaping. I mean, it was just so offensive. This horrible tragedy happened, and you show this dog with a family after this family was brutally murdered. I mean, it didn't make any sense to me. I just felt that was totally inappropriate.
Oh,
you also mentioned Tom Lydon said that he was given 1,200 to 1,500 pages. Any idea?
He was given the entire Crowley case file. He said everything, even the tox screenings, and he specifically said the tox screenings for David were negative at any signs of drugs.
Oh, and say that again now, Ann. That's the toxicology reports?
Yep. And Lydon had the toxicology reports because Erik Nelson was trying to say David was, influenced by drugs and alcohol, and Lydon said tox screen inconclusive for drugs and alcohol. No sign of it.
And no sign for the other two, I'm assuming, right?
No.
Wow, interesting. The definition of propaganda is trying to publicly sway opinion on a certain topic. It sounds like this movie is just a propaganda piece. It doesn't get into the investigation, doesn't talk about the bullet above the head. It doesn't talk about where the body parts were. It doesn't talk about the back sliding glass door left open. It doesn't talk about any of the investigative forensics or anything, it sounds like.
It doesn't talk about any of that. And it uses emotion to persuade people to one point of view.
It's almost like a mind control at work in the movie itself.
Yeah, and other interesting thing that came up several times during the Q&A was Gray State is still a viable film. People in Hollywood are still very interested in the script. It could be sold. It would be bought and smashed up in a heartbeat. And I got the impression that if Gray State was bought, it could be pieced out or made into different things. It doesn't necessarily have to come out as Gray State. It could be made into something else. Very,
very key point.
Boy, very interesting. Any other thoughts on when you went through the house, Ann? Any other things that you've picked up, or senses, or feelings, or that you can recall?
Nothing I can think of. It's not. I didn't feel any possession or entity or occult, anything in that home. The psychic did say a blessing when she walked through. The only impressions I saw, like I said, were a result of a strong emotion or strong energy in that area.
In which area?
Okay, so how do I describe this? I walked through the front door, and I literally felt like a trail of footsteps, but I felt that walking through the front door was backwards. So the footsteps started in the master bedroom down that narrow hall, and it abruptly stopped in this area between the living room and from the kitchen island, and I felt like it was a traumatic stop, like literally stopped in your footsteps in that area. There was another area in the basement in front of this wall. I could be a little biased, but when I was watching a Gray State documentary, David had against one wall like a map of the film, and he had post-it notes on what he was saying, so that area I was sensing. And then the other area I felt strong energy, like I said, was that small bedroom across the master, and I felt that's what an important discussion was made and that David and Kamal were planning to leave, but were stopped before they could do so.
Interesting. So they were on the clock was ticking, essentially. They needed to do something on the final days, but they didn't do anything quick enough, as bodies were found on January, I think it was the 17th of 2015. The 3 bodies were found. Interesting. All right, anything else to add, Greg? Any other insights or questions for Ann while we have her on the line?
I'm kind of fixated now on these 1,200 to 1,500 pages when we only got 93 pages.
Well, we both.
Of nothing.
You're right, Greg, and that's a good point, because we did file a Freedom of Information Act with the Apple Valley Police Department in Apple Valley, Minnesota, and we did receive a 94-page PDF file of typically it was like supplemental reports. Narratives and some statements and things like that, but nothing real big. And then when we went back and asked Detective Gummert, the lead detective in the case, is that everything? And I think, how did he respond to you?
He said yes. He said if you've seen this, that you've seen our whole case. And then several people also told us that these 94 pages we're gonna prove that David Crowley was guilty. They don't prove anything. So if there's more stuff out there that might prove it, then they should put that stuff out. Now, if these other 1,400 pages help disprove it, then it makes sense to me why they haven't put it out, because it's only going to hurt their case further.
Interesting. Now, yeah, and I agree. We were told from Officer Gummert essentially that we had received everything. Now, everything, the disclaimer on the word everything is if there were photos and gruesome photos and up-close shots that weren't really necessary, that could be potentially thrown out on public or social media, then they didn't give us those types of things, and that makes sense. But if we're talking 1,400 pages, I can't believe that they would all be that horrendous and that gruesome. That's interesting. The other thing that I heard on these pages and on these Facebook pages is that those who were involved in the documentary or the film had always said that once that came out, that would answer all of our questions. This documentary would answer everything, proving what really happened. Did you get that sense, Ann, when you saw that documentary? Did that kind of bring closure to everything on this case, or did that just bring more questions?
I think it brought me more questions. I think they're just assuming people aren't going to ask questions and they're going to believe this emotional narrative. Now, the main so-called alleged evidence in the documentary was David's electronic journal. But at one point during the journal, his father admitted that some of his snarky comments are just David being David. So to me, the journal doesn't prove anything, especially if you don't understand the kind of person David is and his language and his character. You could read that totally out of context.
So once again, you could basically the producers here of this film could cherry pick whatever they wanted and make it look like an episode of The Shining with Jack Nicholson in the movie The Shining, and kind of portray David Crowley to be that, and that's essentially what this documentary was, kind of going down the Shining avenue, pushing that narrative that he just went nuts, but also saying at the same time that he had PTSD and he was abusive and there was demons. Wow.
Well, and there's actually here's a good example from a gray state where that actually did happen. They showed a clip of Danny Mason talking about he knew David was, having mental problems when David asked him to sign away his actor's rights to the film. The next clip is David's dad reading the electronic journal saying something to the effect of, "I must destroy Danny Mason." And then and they're pieced side to side, right? And then his dad says, he laughs, he said, "I think that's just David being David. That's his sense of humor." But if you didn't understand that or get that, you would think that the electronic journal saying, yeah, he wants to destroy this guy. Yeah, he asked him to sign his actor's rights away. He really must be insane. So, I mean, this movie is very persuasive in a bad way. If your mind's not open and you're not questioning, you could easily get sucked in.
Very interesting. Well, we might have to, this could warrant a whole other discussion on another broadcast just about this documentary by itself. Wow. That is interesting. That's shocking. Not in a good way either. That's like you said, I like the word that you used, Anne, was you said you were offended, highly offended watching this thing. I think when I see it for the first time, I'm looking forward to seeing it myself just to see what's all in it, but if I come away feeling offended, that's not a good thing.
I would just say to people, don't dig deeper, look at all sides of the evidence. Don't just watch one movie and believe that tells the story, because there's much more and we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
Very interesting. Well, Anne, I'd like to thank you for your time tonight and calling in. That's very informational, very good information. And for those watching this, and when we post it, feel free to comment down below the video with any questions or comments that you may have, or something that we may have even missed. But once again, thank you for your time, Anne.
Thank you.
Greg, any more follow-up here to wrap up the show tonight? Any other things?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for listening in. We'll do sounds like another broadcast coming up here, and possibly just a documentary in and of itself, because that could be a whole show by itself. But anyway, interesting. Well, for Greg Fernandez Jr., this is Dan Hennon saying thanks for listening.